All right, good morning. Welcome to Ridge Church. Hope you guys are doing well. My name's Chris. Get to be one of the pastors around here. I'd like to say a special welcome to those of you on the front row. So thanks for coming. So I want to start with a statement, and then I want to tease this statement out a little bit before we get to our passage of Scripture for the day. This is a statement. By intention or by default, you have a way of life. Maybe a better way of saying it is you have a way of doing life. And I say it this way, by intention or by default. Like whether you did it on purpose or it just happened, there is a way that you live your life. There's certain things that you do. There's routines in the morning. There's all sorts of things that are a part of how you do your life. And maybe you inherited this, like it's just like it was in the DNA, or you just did whatever your parents did, or someone else that was a mentor in your life. You did what they did. You just kind of picked it up, and then you found yourself one day just doing those same things. Like the rhythms of life, the way that you vacation, you just inherited that. Some of you are moving away from something. Some of you are moving towards something when it comes to your way of life. For some of you are like, I just don't want to do anything the way it was done. Like you're just like trying to build like whatever the other boss did or the other company did. It's like you're doing the opposite of that. Or like whatever your parents did, like with money, you're like, I'm going to do the opposite of that. Whatever they did, however they handled conflict. For some of you, you look at your parents and go, what they did, I want to repeat that. You're moving towards it. So all different ways that we arrive at it, but you have a way that you're doing life. There's a way that you handle money. There's a way that you handle, again, I mentioned conflict. And again, maybe it's intentional. Maybe you're moving towards something. Maybe you're moving away from something. But you have, and I have, a way of doing life. And I'll give you an example. Here's one. You have a way of life. You're either over or you're under. Like I like to bring this up about once a year to create some controversy, to divide the church. One day we're going to have a campus that's the Ridge Over TP campus, and then there's going to be the Ridge Under TP campus, because I don't want you to worship with people you can't trust, right? In my household, growing up, we were under. How many of you are under? Let me hear you. All right, small crowd. Not proud about being under. How many of you are over? You don't have to be judgmental. So I grew up in a household where it was under. Like it was under. I didn't know this. I thought the whole world operated this way. And then I got married. And now I'm over. Like it's over. And the reason I am is because I like my marriage. And it just worked out better that way. So this is just the way of life. And you have a way of life. There are things you do and you don't even know you do them. And it's just how it is. In fact, until you're introduced to somebody else's way of life, you didn't even know you had that way of life. I have in my life something we call the blue chair. If my kids could tell this story, my wife, anybody that visits our house after 9 o'clock, they would tell you that part of my routine involves what is affectionately known as the blue chair. It's this old chair we've had forever. It's got an ottoman. And at some point, you're going to find me sitting in the blue chair with a gray dog to my left and a brown dog in between my legs. And that's how the night is going to finish. It's just a way of life. Like it's a part of how I function in life. And you guys have these things too. Like if you have a sports team, you have a way of life. Like every sports team like has its own like internal culture. Like there's weird things you do when you're in the stadium, weird ways you dress, there's weird things you say, there's all these different things, and you know this. So I grew up about 5 minutes from the University of Georgia. And so I'm a huge Georgia Bulldogs fan. You can feel whatever you want to feel about that. I already feel judged about the toilet paper thing, so just keep it coming, right? But I'm a huge Georgia fan, and this like just became like my kids didn't grow up in Georgia. They grew up here in Charlotte, but they're all Georgia fans, to the point that my son took his first professional job in Athens, Georgia. He moved there to the point that one of my daughters that's getting ready to graduate from college has already taken her first job in Athens, Georgia as well. And when I was saying that out loud, I thought, I better tell you guys, my wife and I have not taken a job in Athens, Georgia. We're ride or die with Charlotte if God gives us the grace to be. But we took them to these games like all through their growing up years, and there's weird things that you do that you don't know are weird because it just becomes the norm. So every time there's a kickoff at a Georgia football game, this is what happens. All right, now some of you have no idea what happened. They say, go dogs, sick 'em, woof, woof, woof. Feel free to try it at your own leisure. But this is what we do, right? It's a part of it. If you're an Alabama fan, somebody says Alabama, you say, man, they're always loud and proud, all right? Gators, if you're a Gator fan, then you do the chomp, right? If you are, no one, it's fine, it's fine. It's been a bad decade, we'll all acknowledge that. So if you're like a UNC Chapel Hill, you all know that, like a Tar Heel, you know that I don't know either. I think you just become a doctor and lawyer if that's like, I don't know. They've got something, though, that is their culture, right? We all have this. I heard, had the privilege of hearing this person named Elizabeth Dixon. She's the customer relations VP of this, I call it an organization, but really it's like an eat, work, and play community called Trillith. It's just outside of Atlanta, maybe actually in Atlanta proper. But it's fascinating. So they have a movie studio, they have all these different amenities, they have apartments, and it's like it's like Truman's World for those of you old enough to remember. They've created their own world. Dan Cathy, the former CEO and leader of Chick-fil-A, is the one that has started this. And I was listening to Elizabeth Dixon talk. She was talking about culture and how every organization has a culture, and she defines culture this way, and I love this. I wrote it in my notes. She said, culture says, this is how we do things around here. That's all culture is. Somebody's saying, this is how we do things around here. This is our way of life. This is how we function as a group. Now, here's what's true. Every family, every organization, every business, every school, every church, including this one, has a culture. Yours, your church, your family, your business, whatever you do, your school, where you're going to school currently, the one that you graduated from, your soccer team, they all have a culture. The only question is it by intention or is it by default? I adopted this idea that Elizabeth talks about as we talk about culture. I say oftentimes for Ridge Church and for our staff and our leadership, like, hey, this is just how we do things around here. I'm not necessarily saying everyone should. I don't even know if this will be the same thing that we're doing 5 years from now. But in this moment of time, this is just how we do things around here. And we had for years 4 leadership values. One of them was the value of teamwork. And that sounds simple, but how you define it is everything. And we talked about adding value to one another. And one of the sub-notes, we talked about gossip. Gossip and slander. Like, if you don't know this, let me just tell you, it'll kill a marriage, it'll kill a business, it'll kill an organization, it'll kill a church, it'll kill anything. And so I just wanted like a zero tolerance policy for gossip and slander, but I couldn't get my language around it. And so I heard this other organizational leader talking about it, and he defined it. He said this. He said, hey, here's how we define gossip in our organization. And again, this is under my value of teamwork. He said, any time that you find yourself talking to someone about a problem and they don't have the authority to solve that problem, it's gossip and knock it off. And I'm like, man, that's it. So in our organization, we just said, hey, and in our leadership, we just said, hey, you can talk to you can go up with your problems, just don't go down, don't go side to side. If there's something, go to the person that has the authority to do something about it. And I'm telling you, that is a game changer. And here's what I would say. I don't know if everybody should do it that way, maybe, but this is just how we do things around here. This year, we actually did something that after years, over a decade of having these same cultural values, we added 2 values. One of them was the value of curiosity. And I was trying to solve a problem. I felt like there were some things missing, and I just said, man, it's so easy, and you guys will know this. It's so easy to get married to your way of doing things, right? And I wanted us to kind of keep this curiosity. And here's how I said it. I want us to have open hands that lead to active feet. Like, I want us to stay curious about the process and the things, and I want us to say, man, is there ever, the thing that we're so passionate about, what if there's a better way to do it? What if there's a different way to do it? In fact, what you experienced, if you were here last week, what you saw on the screens just before I came up of that baptism, that was a direct result of this value of curiosity, of us just saying, hey, we've never done it this way before. We used to always do it another way. We had never done that way before. We said, hey, what if it's possible that there's another way to do this? And so that value emerged and took us into a way of doing life. And here's what I would say again. I'm not saying every church should have the value of curiosity. I'm not saying it should be in your home or your business. I don't know. But I'm just saying that's how we do things around here. Now, the reason I say all that, and I feel like this is important, I'll spend some time setting this up before the scriptures for this reason. The reason I'm saying this is that Jesus had the same thing. We know it as the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, I would encourage you, go back, read it over and over and over again. Jesus preaches this sermon. And in this sermon, basically, if I could summarize it, it is Jesus saying, hey, this is how we do things around here. This is the way of life. This is the way of Jesus. And then other times, in addition to the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus will drop nuggets. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's distinct and clear and overt. But he would drop these little hints to how we do things around here. In fact, when Jesus would teach, he would call his culture, he would call his way of doing things, he would refer to it as the kingdom. The kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, sometimes just the kingdom. And when we talk, I'll talk about this a little bit more next week. When we talk about volunteers at our church, we actually started years ago calling them culture builders for this reason. Not because we're building the culture of Ridge, but we're building the culture of kingdom. So Jesus would talk about this way of doing life. And we have these little snippets where you get to see not just Jesus preaching a sermon, but Jesus living life. He's walking with his followers. He's engaging with them. And these things would emerge that are just the way that Jesus did life. And so as we've been in this series, The Way of Jesus, that's what we've been talking about. How does he do life? How does he invite us to do life? And Jim, if you missed it, I would encourage you to go back to listen to part 1. He kicked us off talking about, literally preached out of the Sermon on the Mount and talked about the wide road and the narrow road. How that there's a lot of people on the wide road. It's the popular road, but it leads to destruction. There's a narrow road that's different. It's more difficult. It's a harder way, but it's a better way that leads to life. And he said this as we started the series, that Jesus' invitation wasn't simply to believe in something. Belief is always the starting place in our faith journey. To put our faith in Jesus, to believe in the work of Jesus on the cross and the resurrection. But it was never meant to be the destination. Jesus invited us not just to believe in something, but to follow someone. That's the essence of the way of Jesus. And then last week, I came back and I talked about the fine print that sometimes we as church leaders and churches just don't like to talk about. And I talked about this and I said this, what if following Jesus is better than you could imagine, but also harder than you thought? What if the way of Jesus is more challenging? And Jesus invites us to give up the ultimate authority in our lives and just say, hey, I want to be in the driver's seat of your life. We talked about how Jesus invites us not just to be consumers of kingdom and all the perks of kingdom. And there's so many perks to being a follower of Jesus. But he says, don't just be consumers, but I want you to become a contributor. And so today, as we continue in this series, I want to talk about this idea that we all want to be great. Like it surfaces in different ways and different personality types and different seasons of life. But man, your kids want to be great. You want to be great. You want your husband or wife to be great. You want your teacher to be great. You want to be a great teacher. You want to be great. And Jesus actually addresses this. He tells us what to do if we want to be great. And we're going to look at this passage, but as with most of the ways of Jesus, it's a little bit counterintuitive. It's a little bit upstream to the rest of the cultural current. So it picks up in Matthew 20. Jesus is doing some teaching towards the end of his life. He's on his way to Jerusalem where eventually he will be arrested, he'll be tried, he'll be killed, be crucified. And we get this insider look at a conversation by Matthew, who's one of the guys he's recording. And it is fascinating. We take it for granted sometimes, but Matthew was there. Some of these conversations and interactions, he was literally in the middle of them. So we get an inside look, and it starts in Matthew chapter 20, verse 20. It says, the mother of Zebedee's sons were James and John, not James, the brother of Jesus, another James. These are two of the people in Jesus' inner circle. The mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, she asked a favor of him. Talking about asking a favor of Jesus. Now, when I read this, it's kind of cracked me up. I'm like, wait a second. So you guys, you have something that you want to ask Jesus. So you go get your mom. You're like, hey, can you ask Jesus? We don't want to ask him. You know, like I don't know how it went. I don't know if they had whiny voice. You can't see that in the text. But like in my brain, it was. And so, yeah, like the answer is yes. They went and got their mom to pitch this thing. It's like, so you got a big idea. You say, hey, mom, can you pitch the idea to Jesus? And that's exactly what happened. Now, before we're too harsh with these guys, some scholars believe that John could have been as young as 15 years old when this happened, maybe 16 years old. And so there they are. They got their mom. Mom's pitching to Jesus. Jesus says this, what is it that you want? And she continues, Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. Now, I don't know what you feel, maybe nothing when I read this, but this is a bold request. When these guys were thinking about kingdom, it was not what I just spent the first portion of this sermon describing. They weren't thinking about a way of doing life. That's how we think of it looking back. They were thinking an actual kingdom. They thought Jesus they had seen what he could do. And they thought he was going to set up a physical, literal kingdom where he would be king. And they're saying this. And when you do, hey, mom's asking, could we be on your right and your left hand? In other words, they're saying in this kingdom, we want to be the top two positions of authority in your kingdom. If you've ever heard the term right-hand man, it comes from this idea that the person right next to the king has the greatest authority-making decision of anyone but the king. Other than the king, that is the highest authority in the land, makes decisions and laws that the king doesn't have time for. So they're saying literally, can you put us at the highest position of authority? Now, again, before we're too harsh with these guys in our mind or in reality, they just wanted to be great. Like if you can pull back from the story, these guys just wanted to be great, just like you, just like me, just like the people in your life that you know, some of the people at work that annoy you. They just wanted to be great. And they thought the way to do this, in essence, was to climb the ladder. Here's what they thought. They thought, if I can climb, I think we got a picture, if we can just climb, if we can just take a step. They thought the way to do this was to level up. They thought, hey, if I can just, wherever I'm at on the ladder, if I can just climb higher, that's going to be the secret to happiness. That's going to be the thing that fulfills me if I can just get up a little bit higher. And this is the same way we think. We think about this at work. If I could just get a little bit higher, if I could just climb a little bit more. We think about this with our bank account. If it could just go north, not south, right? If it could just go a little bit higher. We think about this on a sports team or in college. If I could just get A's and B's this time around. If I could just get all A's this time around. If I could just climb a little bit higher, then life would be better. And they thought that this was a secret to happiness. They thought that this would be the thing that fulfilled them. And again, this is the same thing that we do. This is the same thing that I do. I think if I could just get a little bit higher, if I could just be a little bit better leader, if I could just be a little bit better communicator, if I could just climb a little bit higher, if I could just do it, then there's going to be happiness. Then I'll achieve in life what I need to achieve. And it's the same thing we do. The only difference is these guys are pitching it to Jesus. And they're saying this, Jesus, if you could just give us a position in your kingdom, that'll give our lives meaning. That'll give our lives purpose. That'll make our lives count for something. I don't know if you've ever been there in a season of your life where you just go, I don't know if anything I'm doing counts. These guys say, they just wanted their lives to count. At the end of the day, they just wanted to be great. Their assumption that was underneath this request that their mom made for them was that the higher we climb, the happier we'll be. Listen to what Jesus responds. He says, you don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup that I'm going to drink? Jesus is saying, guys, I don't think you understand what you're asking for. I don't think this means what you think it means, sitting at my right or my left. I don't think this pathway to be close to me, I don't think you understand, because Jesus knows what's coming. Jesus knows that what's in his future is suffering. Jesus knows that this beautiful kingdom that he spends his entire ministry talking about and modeling is going to be built on the foundation of his death. He knows what's coming. And he says he knows what it's going to take to establish his kingdom. He says, I don't think you guys know what you're asking for. And there's no break in our English Bible. The scriptures say that they respond, we can. It's like, I don't think you know what you're saying. This is like, this in my brain, this is like the kid saying, hey, put me in, coach, I'm ready. Put me in, coach. My first thing I thought about, my sophomore year in high school, I made the varsity basketball team, barely, so I got to warm the end of the bench. It was kind of fun, got to do all the things for all the other players and just be at the end of the bench. And I remember we were playing this team, and our star point guard was guarding one of the best players in the state. About 3 minutes in, he had 3 fouls, and I hear the coach yell, Brown, get in here. And I looked around, I'm like, who's he talking to? Like, I could barely hear him. I was so far down at the other end of the bench, and I'm like, oh, he's talking to me. So, it took me 3 minutes to get over to where the coach was. I'm like, all right, put me in, coach, I'm ready. Puts me in on this star player, And that day, I earned my starting position for the rest of my, no. I got 3 fouls in 3 minutes. By the time I got back to my seat on the bench, it was still warm, right? It's like, put me in, coach. I'm ready. But what's that round leather sphere called again that you throw in the basket? Like, I had no idea. I was not ready for the moment. I had no idea. These guys are going, put us in, coach. We can do it. Like, they're thinking perks. They're thinking privileges. They're thinking status. They're thinking, I think we can do it, Jesus. We'll drink the fine wine next to the king. We'll have all the stuff. I think we're ready for the riches. They're thinking status, but Jesus is talking about suffering. Jesus is talking about serving. He says this to him. He says, you indeed will drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. Jesus is actually speaking prophetically here. Like, he reaches into the future with what he can see that these guys don't know. And he says, hey, it is actually funny that you should ask. It is actually going to become hard for you because of me. Your life is going to become more difficult because of me. You're going to suffer because of me. And history tells us that James, one of these two brothers, was the first of the original disciples to be martyred for his faith. He was beheaded by Herod Agrippa. John was the only one of the original disciples that we have record that wasn't martyred for his faith. Some church historians believe that he was, but most believe that he died in prison. But he was beaten. He was in prison. He lived out his life in prison as a result of his faith in Jesus. And Jesus is saying prophetically, hey, you guys are going to drink from this cup, but let me just tell you, Jesus is the one with all authority equal to God. He defers, and he says, essentially, you're clamoring for something that only God can give. This is where it gets spicy. Verse 24, I love it. It says, when the 10, this is the other disciples, when the 10 heard about this, meaning they weren't there, they weren't invited to the party, and they're like, wait a second, you had your mom pitch Jesus? Like, that's what happened? It says they were indignant with the two brothers. Like, you pulled the mom card. You went to Jesus and you clamored for position, and they're angry. But here's the thing, they're not angry out of nobility. They're not angry out of honor. They're not angry out of humility. They're angry because they wanted the same thing. They wanted position, and they wanted power. They wanted the stuff that came with being close to the one who was at the center of the show. And they were just mad that these two brothers beat them to the request. Because these guys, they thought the same thing, and you see it all throughout the narrative of Jesus. They thought the higher we climb, the happier we will be. The closer we can get to the top of the inner circle, the better things will be for us. And this is a little side note. I was thinking about this as I was preparing this message. This is where that way of life leads. If you find yourself climbing the ladder, it's going to lead you to a place, inevitably, eventually, if not immediately, it's going to lead you to a place of frustration. You're going to get angry. You're going to be frustrated at the person that's on a rung ahead of you. You're going to get frustrated at the person that's a rung below you, that's bumping into you, that's pushing you. It leads to this dissatisfied comparison kind of lifestyle, and that's what was playing out with Jesus' disciples. And Jesus sees all this happening. He says, all right, team huddle, we're going to talk this out. Verse 25, Jesus called them together and he said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. He's saying this, there is a way that they do life. There is a way that they do leadership. There is a way that the culture around you would say, this is how we do things. And then he says this, not so with you. He said, hey, I know that you've seen it. I know you've seen people manipulate their authority and use their power to protect their power. I know you've seen this. You've seen people do everything, make sure that everyone was subservient to them. He's saying that is the way they do life, but not so with us. He's saying there's a different way of life in my kingdom. There's a different culture in my kingdom. See, and I know the example that was set for you is climb at all costs, no matter who you got to step on, what you've got to do, because that is the pathway to happiness. And Jesus says, hey, it is different in my kingdom. Instead, whoever wants to become great, and this is so important, whoever wants to become great, notice what he doesn't do. he doesn't reprimand them for wanting to be great. Like, let me just tell you, there's nothing wrong with that. I believe that your child, that strong-willed child that is about to break you, that wants to be great, I believe God put that in them. That thing in you that wants to be great, that thing in me that wants to be great, I believe that is the fingerprints of God on your soul and on your life. God put that in us. You want to be great. He doesn't reprimand them for wanting to be great, but what he does is this, and this is so important, he just redirects it. He doesn't say stop wanting to be great. He just says, hey, I want to redirect this. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must become your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Now, this is strong language. A slave or a servant in that culture was defined by what they do. He was saying, hey, I want the thing. In other words, their literally low place in life, they were defined by the fact that your whole life is about serving other people. He was saying, this is to become the identifying mark of your life, just as the Son of Man, talking about Jesus, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus, one with God, the ultimate authority. And what does he do with his authority? He uses his authority. He uses his position to lay down his life to platform ours, mine, yours. That's what Jesus did with his authority. He says, that's my example. I've heard it said this way, the way of Jesus is a race to the back of the line. That's so counterintuitive. That is not what culture teaches us. It's not doing whatever it takes to get to the front. Jesus is saying that my way isn't about climbing the ladder. My way is about becoming the ladder. You know, what is a ladder? A ladder is something that helps you get to places you couldn't have otherwise gotten on your own. Helps you see things you couldn't see, reach things you couldn't reach. Jesus says, my way is not about climbing the ladder. My way is about becoming the ladder. This is my summation of this whole thing. Spend your life climbing the ladder, and you'll miss greatness. Spend your life being the ladder, and you will become great. Instead of forcing the room to orient to us, instead of forcing the family to orient to us, instead of forcing the team to orient to us, the friend group to orient to us, make it about them. This is what Jesus said. And Jesus said, hey, this is how we do things around here. This is the way of life. This is the way of Jesus. And if this sounds backwards, it is. Like, no one else is teaching this message. No one else in culture is teaching this. But often the way of Jesus is counterintuitive. But let me say it this way. The people that you like the most, the people that you enjoy the most at work and in life and in friendships, the people that you want your kids to marry, the person you want to marry, the people that you admire the most in life have gotten this. Like the people that you want to mentor your kids. I was thinking about this. My friend Marla is mentoring one of my daughters, and I don't know a greater servant leader. I don't know someone that embodies this more. That's the people you want investing in your life and the life of your kids. These are the people you want to do life with. I heard a pastor say this, and we'll wrap up. At funerals, and I've done a lot of them, no one talks about how high people made it on the ladder. No one talks about that. But you know what finds its way emerging into these funeral services, these celebrations of life? The moments where someone became the ladder for someone else. This is the Jesus way. And just imagine what would happen if this became the identifying mark in our life. For some of you, this would save your marriage. If you just raced to the back of the line, both of you, and you outserved one another. This will save your family dynamic where one day when your kids are no longer in the home, they'll want to come back to the home. This will save your working relationships for some of you. This race to the back of the line. Imagine what would happen in our office. Imagine what would happen in our neighborhoods. Imagine what would happen in our homes. Whew. It's a game changer. Now, here's the question. Some of you go, hey, Chris, that's good. That's cute. That works on Sundays. But tomorrow, I go back to the office. And none of that works. Like all that, like, Chris, I hear you, but like That's like good church talk, but Monday's coming. School's coming. The office is coming. Like this life is coming. Whatever I've got going on, it's coming. And this thing you're talking about, that sounds good, but it won't play. Hey, Chris, if I do that, who's going to look out for me? Who's going to have my back? And I just would tell you, and this is where we've got to take a little step of faith. I think the hand that raises in the back of the room is the hand of God our Father saying, I've got you. I've got your back. You take care of them, and I'll take care of you. Why? Because this is how we do things around here. Last thought. The band's going to come. They're going to lead us. Just in a song of worship, there's a danger with this type of message. Like, and I think about this often. Like, what I don't want you to hear is just, oh, Chris is telling me, just try harder. I knew it. I need to serve. I need to try harder. I got to try harder. This isn't a try harder message. This is the reality. The way of Jesus is not simply about adjusting your activity. Like, that's not what I'm suggesting today. The way of Jesus is about activating your identity. Jesus says, this isn't what you do. This is who you are. This is who we are. And you may have been sold a bill of goods. Maybe someone told you something different. Maybe you assumed something different, and you brought into the Jesus way of life another way of life that was never meant to be there to begin with. But Jesus will say, hey, listen, I'm just telling you, this is who you are. You're built to serve. You're going to find satisfaction, meaning, purpose when you elevate others, when you become the latter. This is the way of life. This is who you are. And when you step into who you are, man, something lights up in us, right? Something lights up in the people around us. So we're going to close with a song that's just a declaration. It's an invitation to make a declaration, an invitation to a reminder of just who Jesus is. And maybe you're not quite there yet to say, hey, I'm all in on this thing and I'm giving up the steering wheel. Like, that's okay. I get that's a big step. But maybe you just listen to these words. Maybe you sing these words. Maybe you even say, Jesus, I want these words to be true. For some of you, you just need to be reminded and just declare it as we sing. This is the way. You know, it's a narrow way. It's different. But I'm trusting you. I'm claiming these things. I'm declaring these things. So I want to pray for us. Father, thank you for your mercy. I'm so grateful for your word. Thank you for Matthew, who recorded this so that we could see these interactions. Jesus, thank you for not only teaching about the way of Jesus, but for modeling this way. And God, for us, I just pray that you liberate us this morning. It's not a try harder, but I pray that you liberate us into our identity. For those that are followers of you, God, for every other person, I pray they would find their identity in you, that they would become a follower of you. And I just pray in this song, just be a simple reminder as we sing as a church together, just to declare your goodness. To maybe take a step and say, I'm not quite there yet, but I want to be able to declare these words. So we love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hey, why don't you stand with us? Again, if this song's new to you, the words are on the screen. Pay attention to the words. Sing with us, celebrate with us as we wrap up our time together. Chaos